to share with your audience some of my research and just a little bit of what I do that's been going on for quite a while, for a few years now. Um, to get right into it, as you can see here on the screen, we have Meluhha, the tale of two toponyms. And we're going to go right into it now. All right, so the intent of this article is to offer some clarity and understanding of a people known as Meluhha and who they were and their direct interactions with Mesopotamians. In gathering this information, it was necessary to consult Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform sources, which speaks continuously of a people called Meluhha. Now, if we go to the Rassam cylinder royal inscription of Ashur-banipal, mentioning the first Egyptian war of 667 BCE, and there he specifically identifies, as you can see on the screen, Taharka, who was both king of Kush and Egypt. Pardon my, I hope I don't offend anybody if I use Kush, Egypt as opposed to Kemet or whatever. Interchangeable. I might come,
No, it's
you
all
know,
good. This your
doesn't matter. All
presentation. It's
right,
all
bad.
good.
All right, cool. All right, so anyway, if you look on the screen, you'll see this is clear because Kor here is usually identifying mountains or the lands of rivals or enemies. So here we have, as you can clearly see, Taharka, and you see a Kor Masur, Egypt, Kish, Kemet, and you have Kurusi, which is as Kush, that the Neo-Assyrians had called them. So on my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Meluhha, Ethiopia. As for Taharka, the king of Egypt, Masur, and Cush, and you can go to the text, of course, and read it. But what I wanted to point out here is that Makan becomes Egypt and Meluhha, according to the inscription. And in that inscription, we have Ethiopia and Nubia. And this doesn't explain why, in the same sentence, Kor Musur is also called Egypt with Meluhha as Kor Kuusi.
Now, just real quick, not to interrupt, but to add some clarity for the listeners who might not be
Yeah.
abreast to this. Which of the
Mm-hmm.
two terms is said by the other scholar to mean black land?
Meluhha.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay. And we're going to go into that in great detail, but right short and to the point. All right. So this apparent change in the location and identification of Makan and Meluhha takes place multiple years after the fall of Sumer and Akkad. The uneasy relationship between traditional knowledge on the one hand and changing reality on the other, and the resulting lack of geographical clarity can be traced to these inscriptions from the Neo-Assyrian period. This is from a PhD who allowed me to use her work on in certain portions of this that she had wrote her dissertation. And as she was trying to point out, is that this concept of Meluhha being identified with an African people came centuries later, because this is not something that we find in Sumerian sources. We don't find this in any of their inscriptions, but we'll walk through it step by step. And one of these is the so-called Sargon geography, a literary text composed possibly as late as the reigns of Sargon II, Sennacherib, or Esarhaddon. It purports to describe the extent of the empire of Sargon of Akkad, which is the day mid-millennium BC. The composition seeks to summarize Sargon of Akkad's dominance by reference to a wide range of geographical markers. Three are of particular interest in the context of shifting toponyms: Dilmun, Magan, and Meluhha. In the Sargon geography, Dilmun and Makan are described as lands across the lower sea, counterparts to Anaku, Cyprus, and Kaptara, Crete, the Cretians, across the upper sea, while the borders of the country Meluhha and the country of Magan apparently lay 120 leagues from the tail of the Euphrates, an expression used to refer to the river's saltwater outlet near the Persian Gulf coast. And of course, I'm going to be loaded with multiples of sources that you can always go back. Please write things down, as I don't have this presentation online, and I guess I'll do a paper, put a paper up on academia, because I think someone had asked me to do this stuff. So I'm gonna try to get that up there. So if you go claiming the world, geographical conceptions and royal ideology in the Neo-Assyrian Empire, with focus on the reign of Sargon II, and that's her doctoral thesis. And as we can hear, there you have the tail of the Euphrates here. This is where that salt intake goes into the Gulf, where we have on this map here, um, Dilmun, Magan, Meluhha. As you can see, this is bordering near on the Indus, but we'll go into that. So in here, this doctor here is Dr. John Hassman, and there's some key points that I pulled out that I thought was relevant, where you had Old Babylonian and Sumerian references seem to place these regions at the lower end of the Persian Gulf and along the coast of the Indian Ocean beyond, while texts of the late Assyrian period indicate Egypt and Nubia, Ethiopia. He suggests, or well, let me go stay in context. To reconcile these textual inconsistencies, Landsberger many years ago proposed a location for the earlier Magan in Arabia near the lower Persian Gulf, and for earlier Meluhha, an unspecified region east of this Magan. He suggested that these two names were subsequently applied to Egypt and to Ethiopia because in the later Assyrian period, some of the same materials, gold and ivory, were imported into Mesopotamia from the southern Meluhha, as had formerly been supplied by the eastern Meluhha. And there's a reference here that Hertzfeld further suggested that by Meluhha is meant the Red Sea coast of Egypt. Gelb identified Magan with the southern shore of Arabia on the Persian Gulf, extending east from ancient Sumer up to and including Oman. And this is the crust of the arguments when we get to Professor Samuel Kramer. Kramer claims that most cuneiformists would agree that from about 150 BC, Magan and Meluhha corresponded roughly to ancient Egypt and Ethiopia. He argues, however, against the possibility of the name change theory expressed by Landsberger. Kramer states that the verification of an hypothesis involving a name shift in the cuneiform documents for countries so important to as Magan and Meluhha should be based on evidence. Well, we're going to show that because I outlined that. We may not be too sure if Professor Kramer even had access or if he even acknowledged certain locations, because it would then contradict some of his previous work. The exact identity and location of Dilmun, Magan, and Meluhha, especially in the 3rd millennium and 2nd millennium BC, had been rigorously debated over the years. Dilmun of the 3rd millennium sources are accepted as synonymous with Bahrain in the Persian Gulf and Magan in the Orman Peninsula. In the Orman Peninsula. As for Meluhha, the generally accepted view is that it was identified with the Indus Valley region. The increasing distance from Mesopotamia is reflected in the usual ordering of the 3 toponyms, Dilmun, Makan, Meluhha. By the time Ashur-Hadan adopts the practice of calling himself king of the kings of the lands, Dilmun, Magan, Meluhha, The geography of the toponyms had changed. In the Neo-Assyrian text, Dilmun remained in the Persian Gulf. However, Makan and Meluhha no longer refer to Orman and the Indus Valley locations in the south and the east of Mesopotamia. Rather, in the first millennium, the focus was on the west and southwest. Magan is used to designate Egypt, while Nubia or Kush, Ethiopia, is the new Meluhha. My brother, Dr. Kevin Burrell. Dr. Kevin Burrell, in his dissertation, presented for the degrees of Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Stellenbosch. He writes, the shift is also observable in the archaeological records as Parcel outlined. Prior to 2600 BC and for the time following 1800 BC, including virtually the entire second millennium, the records of Indus Mesopotamian contact is not strong or weak. It is not is non-existent. Thus, the archaeological records that is available for this approximately 800 years stand out as a defined contrast to other periods. In other words, between 2600 and 1800 BC, there is a strong archaeological and textual evidence for contact between Meluhha of the Harappan culture and Mesopotamia. But previous to subsequent to the interval and evidence is entirely lacking. What is observed instead from about the middle of the second millennium BC is a shift in the geographical locale of Meluhha in the ancient sources, wherein Meluhha no longer refers to a region in the east, but to a location in Africa. And that's on page 134 of his paper. You can pull that up on academia where I found it. So the reason I pointed this out and I wanted to lay this in is that this kind of I wouldn't want to say it contradicts what he's saying, but what it does is that one soundbite that we may see could could take the audience in a direction without having a better or full context of how what his priest or what his position was in regards to some of the things that he made clear in that video clip. If Meluhha referred to areas east of Mesopotamia in the third millennium BC, but by the middle of the second millennium BC referred to a region in East Africa, it is obvious, therefore, Gelb writes, that some kind of a shift in the location of Makan and Meluhha must have taken place between the earlier and later times. This evidence is seen in the textual sources, as John Houseman notes, references to Meluhha as an eastern region disappear from contemporary Mesopotamian texts at the beginning of the second millennium BC. And that's, of course, from Beyond the Rivers of Cush, Negotiation, Ethnic Identity, and Cushite Israelite Interrelations in the Hebrew Bible by Kevin Burrell. Dissertation presented for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Stellenbosch on page 134. Any questions?
Um, the rest of you guys too on the chat, if you have any questions, feel free to get it in. Nah, right now I'm rocking right with you. I hope the people are following right along. It seems you saying that maybe obviously that the scholar was wrong about that being the black land, basically. But our beliefs about the movement of these locations. Am I incorrect?
Well, he if it in his dissertation, he kind of touches on the fact that yeah, it was as far as the textual sources, many who studied this have presented their argument that it has, matter of fact, universally it has been accepted that this location has been shifted during the Neo-Assyrian periods, who were not Sumerian. Some people, and I'm saying him, but some people put a heavy emphasis on many of the Assyriologists of the early centuries when in the dawning of the age of Assyriology or Orientalists, when they started just tackling the whole um, Sumerian thing, they may have gotten some things wrong. And people like Professor Samuel Kramer, who is, of course, the esteemed professor in that field, there were other people who did challenge him on many of his um, uh, ideas because they studied it as well. But they just didn't get the same type of exposure, I guess you could say, as he did. But we'll kind of touch on that in a moment. So again, the consensus among Assyriologists, Sumerologists, and archaeologists is that one, Dilmun stretched from the island of Falaka in the north of the Persian Gulf to the island of Bahrain in the south, which acted as the center of Dilmun. Two, archaeological excavations and surveys have identified Makan with Oman, especially an-Nasr or an-Nar, during the third millennium. Three, Dilmun and Makan are mentioned in early cuneiform sea trade inscriptions. Meluhha appears for the first time in an Akkadian inscription of Sargon the Great. Sargon boasts of ships that from Meluhha, Magan, and Dilmun, they docked in the newly capitalized or the newly capital Akan, which is Agade. The identification of Meluhha was the great Indus Valley is now almost universally accepted. You can go to the roots of Hinduism, the early Aryans in the Indus civilization by Asko Parpola. That's on page 215. The extensive research and archaeological excavations by numerous organizations and individuals on this subject can be accessed in books, research papers, and online databases. For example, Meluhha was located much further east, 1,272 kilometers from the Euphrates. This name could thus only refer to the Indus region, where between 2600 and 1900 BC, the Indus civilization extended over a huge area. The land of Alam, Anshan, Marhashi, and Arata, among others, lay between Akkad and Meluhha, i.e., in modern Iran, and possibly at times the southern shores of the Gulf. Roads to Arabia, the archaeological treasures of Saudi Arabia, Museum of Islamic Art, Paragon Museum in France, I think it's in, or Germany. The earliest attestation of Meluhha can be found in the inscription of Sharukin, which is Sargon, referring to Meluhha ships docked at its capital in Agade. This is in the inscription of the kings of Agade, column 5, 6. And if you look closely, I'm just going to go straight to the translations. We can see that, well, let's go to the top. Sharukin, king of Kish, won 34 battles. He destroyed the walls as far as the front of the seas, the ships of Meluhha, the ships of Magan, the ships of Dilmun. He collected into the quay in front of Agade. Sharukin, the king of Tutuli, unto Dagan, he worshiped, and on and on and on. We don't see anything here that kind of even remotely connects this with any parts of Africa, but we'll go into that step by step. How did the Mesopotamians communicate with the Meluhhans? Via the system of trade, the Akkadians even had an interpreter of the Meluhha language. In an inscription called the Interpreter of Meluhha Language, this cylinder depiction shows a language interpreter sitting on the lap of an Akkadian or god or king, interpreting for the Meluhhans, bringing tribute. He would need an interpreter because Meluhhans did not speak Akkadian. And I did a little transliteration over here. So you have this indicates that well, Shu Ilishu, interpreter of the Meluhha language. This indicates that the Meluhhan language was not widely understood in Mesopotamia, and that some Meluhhan speakers took local names, in his case, a typical Semitic name. And you can find that right here, as we can see here. Now, if you look closely, here are two individuals that are regarded as being Meluhhans. And this is an interpreter sitting on the lap of either a king, and but based on some people say it's a king. I would venture to say that this was a local deity, and you can see this is clearly an Akkadian because that was the typical Akkadian type of garb that they wore, and he's looked like he's wearing the double horn or triple horn crown. Not too, it's kind of ambiguous right here, but that is possible to what that could be. But what is clear here is that you have these two individuals here, that you have one who is clearly communicating either for or against him. And here's another depiction of that. And there are no known sources of Kush, Nubia, Ethiopia arriving in Mesopotamia under the Sumerians or Akkadians. I just wanted to point that out. Gudea of Lagash spoke to the people of Magan and Meluhha, who came to Sumer with precious wood. And for those who like the Sumerian inscription, of course, you can look at that at your leisure next time you see the video. But the Elamites came to him from Elam. The Susians came to him from Susa. Magan and Meluhha loaded wood from their mountains upon their shoulders for him. And to build the house of Ngirsu, they gathered for Gudea at his city, Ngirsu. This is in the inscription, the building of Ngirsu's temple, Gudea, cylinder A and B, lines 392 through 395. You can always go to the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature and you can pull this up. Now this is from the book that I referenced earlier with Askal Parpola along with his brother Simo Parpola. And what they're showing here on page 135 through 138 is how you'll find in Sumerian inscription references to Meluhha, and you have an individual who was also well, let's go to it. The great garden inside the city of Kishkanu, the Kishkanu garden, the Meluhha garden of Ninmar. There was even a garden named in honor of Meluhha. You had it right here. We can go into some of the details. This is a trade document here, and it's outlining some key points here. You can see what. Let's just start here. Where I want to start at. You can start anywhere. A tablet. I said a tablet of Erdan, son of Ernanshi, Scylla of barley. Details of 3 tablets given against a tablet of Erlama, son of Meluhha. So this is kind of give you an idea that Meluhha is not something that was foreign in Sumer, but that they had some direct interactions. Here we go again. You can look at Erlama, the son of Meluhha, has to recompense I can't think of it, 41.5 pounds of wool, the balance of 2 talents, 50 pounds of wool loaded by him in the year in which the temple of Puzrish Dagon was built in 2058 BC. Tablet of Inintu, son of Dudu, acted for Erlama, son of Meluhha. Here we go again, right here. Now this is from let's get the scholar PhD's scholar's name, King. Here they're showing you again. These are receipts. Literally, these are receipts, and they're mentioning who this person's interaction, And this is all in Sumer. So the Meluhha had already been in close proximity with the people of Sumer by way of trade. In a Sumerian administrative tablet excavated in Yersu, which is Tello today, dated to the Ur-3 period, 2100, 2000 BC, that period, and kept in a border, I can never pronounce that word. It's a museum in Berlin. Their VAT number is, of course, 02333. This example demonstrates that some Meluhhans were integrated into Mesopotamian society. The text mentions workers who resided in the temple of the god Nancy, for example. The reverse side of column 2 mentions a son of Meluhha living in the temple of Nancy. Dumu Meluhha Erin A. Nancy, the son of Meluhha, workers, people of the house of Nancy. Nancy was a local deity in that area. And there is no known textual source that speaks of Cushites or Ethiopians living in the royal house of Nancy. Since the era of Sargon, there was a Meluhha village, and this village was known in the cuneiform inscriptions as the House of Meluhha, a Meluhha. And we know that it's just being identified with the nation because we have this determinative here, which is, of course, key. Temples have been erected in the Meluhha village in Nirsu during the Ur-3 periods. The temples honor the god Nancy, Ninmarki. The village was called Gugaba. The inscription mentioning this is one of the many 600 administrative texts from Nirsu, southern Iraq, and dates to the dynasty of Gudea of Lagash in the second period, and that is in the 22nd century BCE. So, again, if you can pull this, you can go right to that article regarding Meluhha under Simo Parpola and Asko Parpola. It makes clear that the granary of the Meluhha village, this is an actual village. They had a little small town in Sumer that the Meluhhans resided in. And the spelling Meluhha, Meluhhaki, is indicates that the name had a geographical connotation in the present instance. This strongly points to a Sumerized village originally founded by the Meluhhans as a trade colony. If you see A or A2, that's in reference to a building, temple, house. And this is in making reference to the village of traveling merchants. So rendering like inhabitants of Meluhha or simply Meluhhan appears also possible. In that case, the designation would not, of course, refer to the country of Meluhha, but to the village just discussed, where this village is simply Meluhha, whichever the correct interpretation, the use of Meluhha as a personal name and or as a civic identifier implies that the person thus designated was in some way, e.g., by skin color, lineage, tongue, or religion, associable with the people or country of Meluhha, and the fact that a man with a Sumerian name could give his son the name Meluhha, and conversely, that a man called Meluhha could have a son with a Sumerian name is clear evidence of the Sumerization of the name bearers. So, yep, that's the Meluhha village, evidence of etc. A cultural relation of Harappan traders in the late third millennium Mesopotamia, Simon Parpola, Osco Parpola, and Robert H. Brunswick. The point here is these settlements connect the Meluhha village in Nirsu with the temple of Nancy. The Meluhha officials in the inscriptions are excellent examples of primary sources of the Meluhhans being accepted and incorporated into the society of southern Mesopotamia. Certain types of timber woods came into southern Mesopotamia from various places such as Magan and Meluhha from the early dynastic 3 of the Gudea period. Lexical texts confirm the imports of Meluhhan timber, which entered via the ports of the Persian Gulf. Various types of Meluhhan wood would have been identified during the Ur-3 and other periods, and they were mostly used for different types of furniture. This image here is in near it's Hirsu, present day ruins. You can find this in the Oriental Institute of Chicago. I don't need to read that. I think I read that already. Okay, so although the evidence that Indus Valley groups traveled, traded, and settled in designated areas of the Sumerians and Akkadians, no direct evidence of Sumerians in substantial groups traveling directly to the coastal and plains of the Indus Valley has ever been uncovered. These are images here. You can go to the Ashmolean Museum, which has the largest collection of Kish artifacts, where you have images that seem to be very similar to these images, these little tokens in Pakistan. If you go to the Pakistani National Museum in Karachi, like what here, a mythical unicorn seal with the inscription above the horn. The seal was found in an ancient site at Kish, Iraq, during the excavation between 1922 and 1933 by the Oxford Field Museum Chicago expedition. The artifact has the familiar stylized artwork of the Indus seal, right, from the Mohenjo-Daro, I cannot pronounce that, of Harappa. These will be in that region of what we know as India, or now that Indus Valley. And this is just some more information. This is from the Malumu project from page 272. It just gives you an idea of what was excavated. In Ur, you had inscriptions that had Indus seals, 11 in Ur, 3 in Kish, 2 in Lagash, 2 in Eshnana, and Nippur. So let's get down to the core of the argument. The minority view on this topic, such as Dr. Samuel Kramer, in his book, The Sumerians, page 276 and 278, he maintained that the country Meluhha from the earliest times referred to an African location in Nubia or Ethiopia. Most of today's scholars, archaeologists, and Assyriologists, however, emphasize that the evidence unequivocally points to two Meluhha, one Eastern, the other Western. See, the critiques of Kramer's singular Meluhhan theory in I.J. Gelb's Makan and Meluhha in early Mesopotamian sources, 1970. Let's go into it. A contemporary of Dr. Samuel Kramer and an elite Assyriologist professor, Ignace J. Gelb, challenged Kramer's claims from the 25th International Congress on Orientalists in Moscow back in 1960 that there's a singular location for Makan and Meluhha. His critiques in Makan and Meluhha in early Mesopotamian sources, Gelb mentions Ethiopia and Black people, men, as a sarcastic jab at Kramer's argument, which may have led to the individuals like Clyde Winters and others taking Gelb's words out of context. Jacobson and Samuel, Thorklund Jacobson and Samuel Kramer all agreed that there is no good reason to assume that Makan and Meluhha were differently located in the earlier periods than in the later periods, when the identification of Makan and Egypt and of Meluhha with Nubia or Sudan or Ethiopia admittedly rests on clear and firm evidence on page 1. Thus, weighing the evidence offered by the context according to which the Sargonic king Rimush conquered the countries of Parashum, Zahar, Alam, Batsil, and Meluhha. The answer to the two questions can only be that Meluhha was situated not too far from Mesopotamia and north of the Persian Gulf. The closeness of Mesopotamia is based on the logistic and military capabilities of the Mesopotamian kings. The location north of the Persian Gulf is clear from the mention of Meluhha in conjunction with 4 countries, all situated in Iran, northeast and east of Mesopotamia. These are his words. Now, Professor Gelb, the purpose of this note is to present some of my ideas on the location of Makan and Meluhha in the early periods, ideas which I have freely expressed in classes and scholarly discussions, and which are now beginning to appear in print. Kramer also proposes to locate Dilmun in the Indus Valley, a proposition which clashes hopelessly with the generally accepted, and as far as I'm concerned, ironclad identification of Tillman with classical Tylos and the modern Bahrain Islands. These are my conclusions in respect to the location of Makan and Meluhha. Makan is the southern shore of the Persian Gulf and of the Arabian Sea. It denotes Arabia, extending east of the ancient Sumer up to and including Oman. Meluhha is the northern shore of the Persian Gulf and of the Arabian Sea. It denotes Iran and India, extending east of the ancient Alam, Anshan, up to and including the Indus Valley. That's on page 5. As for Makan, the evidence based on conquest by Sargonic kings also indicates the closeness of Makan. Indicates the closeness of Makan to Mesopotamia, page 6. All right. Asko and Simo Parpola suggest that both Sumerian, Meluhha, and Sanskrit Nadlach refers to the same people or lands, i.e., pre-Vedic Harappan culture, and thus, at least in the first instance, this would mean that the name originally applied to the Balu, Keston, Indus Valley region. Thereafter, however, the name seems definitely to have been applied to portions of Africa. Again, that's on Road to Meluhha, D.T. Potts, in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, Volume 41, volume number 4, October 1982, published by the University of Chicago. Now, as we're walking through this, and I'm going to wrap this up shortly, 4 pieces of evidence based on conquest places Meluhha close to Mesopotamia, specifically in Iran, east of Alam and Anshan. The evidence concerning the lapis lazuli, the sisu tree, and the black people of Meluhha corresponding to the Ethiops of classical times place Meluhha between Iran and Afghanistan. The further extent of Meluhha in India is indicated by the imprints. I know of no evidence favoring the location of Meluhha in Arabia, south of the Persian Gulf. That is Ignis J. Gelb, Makan, and Meluhha in early Mesopotamian sources. Um, for the record, the brother, I forget his name already. He put this in his presentation, so he's being fair that in his verse, is certain things are irrelevant, but the point that needs to be made here and to be clear is that it is it's basically what Samuel Kramer and Thorkel Jacobson presented in 1960, but in 1970, Gelb, my audio just went out. Okay, yeah, okay. All right, can you hear
No,
me?
no, you was there. Yeah, we could hear you the whole
Oh,
time.
okay. Sorry about that.
All right, I'm still
Okay.
listening. All right, I'm on mute.
Right. Okay. Why is this thing still here? Let me stop this for a second and see if I can clear this out. Oh, okay, okay. All right. All right. Give me a second. Let me pull this back up. 1 second. 1 second. Screen
Yeah, this is
and
this is bomb information, by the way, and so I'm learning never to make this
hey.
mistake. But I'll let you finish.
No, man, I appreciate that. This is just once I heard it when I saw him on your show, and I was like, oh, okay, let me go check into this, and doing the Sumerian classes, you have access to a number of Assyriologists that they just monitor some of the classes, and if you have questions, they kind of give you a little pointers. So I asked a couple of questions, asked a little things around, so I got a little bit of background information that people kind of help me out with. But you do the same thing, so so I kind of following your trend. So, in reading Gelb's 8-page critique of Samuel Kramer's views on Meluhha, he offers evidence which supports the consensus that Makan and Meluhha were initially nearest to Mesopotamia, refuting Samuel Kramer's Black Ethiopian view. And Kramer writes, uh, in post-Sumerian periods, we find Meluhha mentioned several times as a place of Black men, which leads naturally to an identification of Meluhha with Ethiopia. This is in the book The Sumerians by Professor Samuel Kramer, 1963, page 277. The post Sumerian period would be during the Neo-Assyrian period. That's one of you. In post Sumerian periods, we find Meluhha mentioned several times as a place of Black men. That's why I made that point. So the post-Sumerian periods would be during the Neo-Assyrian period, 746 through 609. The Neo-Assyrians were not Sumerians. Let me go back. The Neo-Assyrians were not Sumerians. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was created through military conquest, political techniques, and cultural influence. They used iron weapons, siege attacks, and skilled archers to conquer many city states and kingdoms in ancient Mesopotamia. They used the cuneiform style of writing, as did so many other people during that period and before. And their inscriptions have contributed to this confusion. More on that in just a moment. On page 6 and 7, Gelb challenges Kramer and any other scholar with a set of questions regarding the African Makan and Meluhha location. Scholars who still scholars who still are inclined to consider the location of Makan and Meluhha in Egypt and Nubia in the earlier periods of Mesopotamia and Mesopotamian history should stop and try to answer the following questions. Can the conquest of Makan and Meluhha by the Mesopotamian rulers refer to the conquest of Egypt and Nubia? That's something that kind of hits it right there. That really knocks it out right there, because we know that the Mesopotamians did conquer Makan and Meluhha, but they did not conquer Egypt and Nubia. The answer would have to be no. At least the two Akkadian kings, Rimush and Naram Sin, they conquered the areas of Parashum and Alam. These countries as well resided near Mesopotamia, near Iran, near Meluhha, to the south and east in the Indus Valley, not to the west in Egypt and Kush, Ethiopia. This is from Daniel A. Boxborg, a translation over Abalagish. I'm sorry, Abalgamesh, king of Parashum, was victorious, and Zahar and Alam and Gupin and Maluha within Parashum assembled for battle. But and in between the cities of Awan and Susa at the middle river, Sid Agatu, the general of Parashum, and these little gaps here, these are fragments because parts of it broke off. Of Balaam he captured, and a burial mound at the site of the town he heaped up over them. Furthermore, the foundations of Parashim from the country of Elam he tore out. And so Remish, king of the world, rules Elam as the god Enlil had shown by the gods Shamash and Elaba. This is on the Royal Monumental Inscription in Old Akkadian. You can go to the CDLI, Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative. That's where you can find this text. Naram Sin, the mighty king of the world quarters the four, victor in 9 battles for 1 year. After in battles those he was victorious. Furthermore, there 3 kings he captured, and before Enlil he had them brought in. And Makan he conquered, and Manium, the lord of Makan, he captured. In their mountains, diorite stone he quarried, and to Agade, his city, he brought it, and a statue of himself he created. To the god he dedicated it. Royal inscription P461 1993, Old Akkadian, the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative. Now let's examine the inscriptions that brought about the confusion and the toponymic adjustment from the Neo-Assyrian periods. And this is where we're going to be wrapping this up. So it won't be too much longer. About another 10 minutes. So as we see here, you can pull this up on the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, or you can pull up pretty up. It's all the inscriptions from the Neo-Assyrian period. On my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Meluhha, Ethiopia. As for Taharka, the king of Egypt and Kush, whose defeat Ashur-Hadan, king of Assyria, the father who had engineered me, he brought about, and whose land he ruled over, he, Taharka, forgot the might of the god Ashur, the goddess Ishtar, and the great gods, my lord, that trusted in his own strength. The point here is we're laying the foundation on how this thing came about and where the shift from what the Sumerians and the Akkadians regarded Meluhha as being, or who they were, to this Neo period, to where their cuneiform inscriptions have taken it into another direction, which is where Samuel Kramer is basing that argument on, where the brother, forget his name, of his name. Let me go up. I'm sorry. Dr. Kevin Burrow, where he's picking it up and just going with that particular a soundbite, if you will. All right. So we just read what we just read beginning in line 53 was how the king Ashurbanipal in his first military campaign against King Taharka in Egypt, the names of the land mentioned are the opening in the opening are Makan, Meluhha, Musur, and Kuusi. As you can see, well, yeah, on my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Meluhha, Ethiopia. As for Taharka, the king of Egypt, and Cush, whose defeat Ashur Hadan, king of Assyria. Meluhha doesn't come up again until column 3, 103 below, where the scribes speak of the king Ashurbanipal's second campaign and those he installed in Alam, Gutium, Amaru, and Meluhha, Ethiopia. And then we do. Moreover, as for Umanigash, a fugitive who had gasped the feet of my royal majesty, whom I had installed as king in the land Alam, as well as the king of the land Gutium, the land Amaru, and Meluhha, Ethiopia. The If you notice, it put when you have right here, when you have Meluhha, they put in parentheses Ethiopia. That's coming. Of course, you can see that's coming from the translation. Whom I whom I had installed as rulers by the command of the gods, Ashur and the goddess Missaluhim, Miss. This is a Neo-Assyrian. Mulusu, he, Shamash, Suakin, Ukin, again made all of them become hostile towards me, and they sided with him. So here we have over here, we can go right here in the inscription. You have Kur El Alam, these are the mountain or foreign peoples, sometimes enemies. And you'll see here, of course, Lugal, these are kings, and you have I forget what Mesh is in the Neo-Assyrian. But the point is coming here is they're letting you know that you're right here in the text. It's giving you a clear indication of how Meluhha is mentioned. And in the translation, they identify it here with Ethiopia. When we check the words of King Ashurbanipal's predecessor, King Ashurhadan, we begin to see an evolution in the place names used. In King Ashurhadan's eighth inscription, we find Kuusi, Kush. However, the country of Meluhha isn't connected to the name Kush yet. And that can be found in line 27 here. Tarku or Taharka, and you have it here. So Taharka, the king of Kush, right here, line 13. Or line 27 here, translation 13. So I, Ashur Hadan, king of Assyria, the center of my army, the army of I followed their great divinity. With their great help, I blew between them like the onslaught of a raging storm, dispersed their concentrated troops, overwhelmed his troops, the leaders of his army, his brothers, his governors, and his third men from the city, Memphis, a distance of 15 days by the command of the god Ashur. Every day, without cease, I set up my order of battle for combat. I slaughtered them like sheep and goat who had fled, because this right here, the line is kind of broken off right here, who had fled from my fierce weapons. They came out and before the gate of, line missing, Taharka, king of Cush, to save his servants. Of course, that's on. There it is. Okay. Then, for no apparent reason or explanation, in King Ashur-Hadan's 16th inscription, we find the country Meluhha mentioned alongside the country of Misr, Egypt. Ashur-Hadan, chosen by the god Ashur, my lord, a good Shiddu, which is in Egypt, and Meluhha, palace of Sennacherib, Sargon II, king of the four quarters. By the time you get finished with this, you'll see, okay, it's clearly this Meluhha is only found in the Neo-Assyrian inscriptions. In his 20th inscription, we see Khor-Musr, Egypt, Upper Egypt, and Cush mentioned. The palace of Ashur-Hadan, mighty king, king of the world, king of Assyria, governor of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the kings of Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, and Cush, son of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, descendants of Sargon II, king of Assyria. So here you have it. Khor-Musr, Egypt, Khor-Patorisi, Upper Egypt, Khor-Kuusi, Cush. They're all mentioned here. But let's go here. Here we see the country of Cush has now become the country of Meluhha. So if you caught that, in Ashur-Hadan's 34th inscription, we see the standard use of the second Meluhha. In my 10th campaign, the god Ashur had me take and made me set out to Magan and Meluhha, which are called Cush and Egypt in their native tongue. I mustered the vast troops of the god Ashur, who are in Nin, I'm sorry, Ni-Anu, the first month. I set out from my city, Ashur, and crossed the Tigris and Euphrates rivers when they were at flood level, and marched over difficult mountains like a wild bull. The point here is this toponymic location differs from the well-known and attested identification of Meluhha by the Sumerians and Akkadians. This Meluhha was changed from the old location to that of Africa. When exactly the change came about isn't exactly known. However, it took place in the time of the Neo-Assyrian period, and the evidence shows that. In Ashur-Hadan's 35th inscription below, we see Cush, Meluhha. The translation correctly has Cush, however, black, which is not in the inscription. This is the root of the claim, black Meluhhans, in line 4. The other word, in other words, the use of black here is not in the inscription, which would be Salamu. Salamu, to be black. This is from the Assyrian English, Assyrian Dictionary, Neo-Assyrian Text Corpus Project, page 125. And so here we have it right over here. We don't see Salamu, but we see here Cush, black Meluhhans. And that's where the root of the confusion comes in as far as some of these inscriptions in the translations. And I think that what I was pointing out to some people was that a lot of how we interpret it today doesn't necessarily, it has to be based on the context. Context is key on how these identifications of people or places and things, how they are applied is based on the context of how it's written. In an Akkadian inscription, Curse of Agade mentions the men of the Black Mountains. However, no Sumerian Akkadian text specifically describes the people of Meluhha as Black people or men. The Meluhhans, the men of the Black Mountains, fought exotic wares, I'm sorry, brought exotic wares up to her. The cursing of Agade, you can pull this up in the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, line 48 through 49. And again, we don't find any references to them. You have Lu, Ker, Gi. In a similar passage, I just added this in there just to give some more context. In a similar passage, you can also read in the Enki and the World Order. It states that then he proceeded to the land of Meluhha. Enki, lord of the Abzu, decreed its fate. Black land, may your trees be great trees. May your forests be great forests of the highlands. Mesh, which is a determinative for trees. All right. So in his 48th inscription, we see Dilmun, Makan, and Meluhha without the apparent attachments to Egypt and Kush. This may have been some scribal influence. There's no way to verify. However, it is vividly clear that this toponymic alteration did take place and is accessible in the inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrians, a force from Assyria, not Sumer or Akkad. And this appears, if you read this inscription, because I'm trying to wrap it up. I don't want to take up, just become mundane with this thing. Um, this appears to be pure propaganda. If your previous king managed to defeat and incorporate a country far away called Meluhha, then you probably should mention it as well. As an example, again, Ashurbanipal's inscription for lines 38 to 39. On my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Meluhha, Ethiopia, Taharka, the king of Egypt and Kush. Conclusion: with the numerous cuneiform sources, the small dwellings of a Meluhhan village in Ur, the historical trade relations with Sumer and Akkad, in my view, via the exhaustive research, the evidence shows that there were definitely two Meluhhas, the Meluhha known to the Sumerians and the Akkadians, and the toponymic shift in the Neo-Assyrian period under Ashur-Hadan and Ashurbanipal, who in an inscription says, "And I, Ashur-Hadan, king of the universe, king of Assyria, king of the kings of Dilmun, Magan, and Meluhha, king of the four regions of the world," royal inscription of Ashur-Hadan, king of Assyria. I have found commentaries from esteemed Sumerologists like Kramer to be problematic and confusing, considering the current archaeological and inscriptions on this topic. The inscriptions Kramer may or may not have viewed in his lifetime. Aside from the references to Meluhha in Neo-Assyrian inscriptions, there's virtually nothing mentioning Meluhha in conjunction with Egypt, Ethiopia, nor Kush in Mesopotamian inscription. And that is the end of that PowerPoint presentation. Oh, I wanted to do this real fast. I don't have to go into it too deeply. Some of the questions that Gelb had put to Kramer and others, which he didn't respond to. Can the conquest of Makan and Meluhha by early Mesopotamian rulers refer to the conquest of Egypt and Nubia? Could copper be mined in and imported from Egypt and Nubia by the Mesopotamians? The Sumerians mined for copper in Mesopotamia, not Egypt nor Ethiopia. There are no inscriptions mentioning copper trade with Egypt nor Kush. Copper was the first metal in Mesopotamia, the first metal the Mesopotamians mined and worked with. Copper was used by the Sumerians and the Chaldeans of Mesopotamia between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. AI Copper Development Association. But I'm just throwing little things I thought was necessary. Can one conceive of diorite being mined in Egypt by the Mesopotamians, mined in Egypt by the Mesopotamians, and transported in flimsy boats over the treacherous waters surrounding the Arabian Peninsula all the way to Mesopotamia. This is diorite. See it right here. This as earlier that when you saw in the quote from the brother Samuel, Dr. Samuel, is the sisu tree known in Egypt and Nubia. The sisu tree, Dalbergia sisu, is a large tree that is native to where? India and Pakistan. The sisu tree was introduced to Egypt by Ibrahim Basha in the age of Muhammad Ali, 1805 1848, for ornamental and timber purposes. Othman, 1939. The sisu tree is also used to treat sores, sore throat, dysentery, syphilis, bronchitis, inflammations, infections, and on and on and on. But the point was, he's putting out some questions. Were the famous mountains of Egypt, which could be identified with the mountains of Macan and of Mesopotamian sources. So that's the end of my presentation. I just wanted to thank you, Brother Smash, for allowing me to share. Really, something when the first time you aired that video was when I went on my overnight campaign, because where I work, I have this kind of access. So I literally spent weeks, well, from then to now, because I kind of touch up on it last week, um, about 7 or 8 hours a night, 5 days a week, going over this and a number of other PowerPoint presentations, not just for this, but for other people, and sharing information with other people on various topics regarding this. So I want to again thank you, and I appreciate you and the work that you've done over the years in presenting information regarding the ancient people of Egypt.
No,
Fact
don't
of
worry about me. Thank you, Brother Chuck, for all the wonderful information you presented today to give some clarity to the so-called Black land of Meluhha, if I got that correct. What I appear to see is that there was some confusion that when the other scholars' presentation, and indeed there were two Meluhhas, and the one becoming associated with Africa came a bit later. There is a question I actually have for you, if you don't mind resharing your presentation again. It was
yeah.
on slide number 41.
Hold on,
It's
let
just
me
a simple, because I got confused by looking at the transliteration and what the scholar had
okay.
put
All right.
over
Hold
from
on.
one of those books. Particularly, he had called the Cushites the Black Meluhha. And so I was looking for the Salamu over in the transliteration, and I was wondering how the scholar came
Okay.
to,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's number
Okay. You see that?
41. No, yeah, I can see it, yeah.
Uh, okay. All right. Let me go down. Uh, oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay. Right here?
Yeah. Well, you were showing us this. Now, if we look
Yeah.
at the bottom, to the right, it
Mhm.
says water channels like horses. He constantly cushed something in the blank. Black Meluhians or whatever. You know what I mean.
Uh-huh.
And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking over to the transliteration to see how did he indicate, because it appears that this time he is talking about inhabitants of Meluhha, which is Cush, and calling them black at this time period. Am I incorrect?
Well, that was the whole point in putting that part in there. You don't find black in the
Exactly.
inscription.
So I see. So what I noticed is what you was teaching on this slide, correct? Is that
Yes.
he just injected the black on the other side? Because when I look over to
Yes.
the line, I don't see Salamu.
Yes. And you can, and that's why I put that particular dictionary, or you can pull it up in any one of the numerous dictionaries. You can go to there's so many databases online, Mesopotamian words, literature, translations, etymologies, attestations, the whole thing. The same way that you have with the TLA. You can go to the EPSI, the Electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of these databases that scholars have put out there to kind of beat those people down that take words out of context or
Mm-hmm.
misconstrued them. You now don't necessarily have to be a linguist and or scholar, because now the data is there that you can cross-reference. You can check it yourself, or if you take the
Yeah,
time and you
that's what
learn the
I'll be
language,
doing that with
you
the
know the basic
TLA.
part.
That's what I tell the people.
Yeah.
These text corpus are for us. You're going to get it interlinear. So one side will be the transliteration, and other side will be the translation. But here's the question. So I might have
Yeah.
not been listening, and I just read the screen. But this the source of this mistake now is what? Like who is the source of this mistake? Is it the text corpus?
Well, to be quite honest with you, they kept it in there. Why? I don't know. Maybe this is me. This is my speculation on it. Because Samuel Kramer is held in such high regards, it is quite possible that they left it in there because that was Samuel Kramer and Thorklin Jacobson's position back in the symposium that they gave back in 1960 in Moscow. They now clearly, anyone that studies um, any one of the Mesopotamian languages, or even Neo-Assyrian, you can clearly see that in the inscription. If you went to the text itself, you won't find the word black there.
I
You
see it
won't
right
find
there.
it.
That's why I
It's
came
not
here because I
in
was
the
looking at
inscription.
that. So I just had mixed while I was analyzing your slide. You was telling me what I was trying to analyze. You see what I'm saying? And it's basically everything that you're saying right in the writing on the top is
Yeah.
what I was investigating over to the left. And so
Mhm.
it was you said the Kramer is, if I'm correct, may have been the one who previously did the work, and then they just
Yeah.
leaned on his laurels
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
because as you know, Professor Emeritus, long after he had stopped in his tenure at the university, his name is immortalized as being the greatest Syriologist or Sumerologist in history. And when you have individuals who is equally, and I want to make this clear, um, someone as equally influential, or I'm trying to find something. Anyone that's more influential with books, um, his colleagues and peers, this would be a clear peer battle between um, Ignis Gelb and Dr. Samuel Kramer. And he says, no, Kramer was wrong.
okay.
You don't
So
find, of course, you don't have a debate going on between the two, unfortunately.
then could the black Meluhha, since we clearly see it wasn't in the transliteration, you think this may have been the scholar's way? Like, I'm just trying to give him something honest more than a quarrel. I'm thinking you think this may have been the scholar's way to distinguish between the two Meluhhas, one that he was saying was not in black Africa, so to speak, and the other one to him would be the black Meluhhas. You see what I'm saying? I don't know, but I'm thinking there
I
may
can
be a.
agree.
Mhm.
I would be inclined to accept that, but for generations to come, it would be a confusing statement. I think that if it were put in parentheses, possibly the possibly Maluha, that would have been easier. That way you can differentiate between the two. But to just have it flowing straight through, it leaves a confusion, and people who are desperate to make this connection. They're saying that Sumerians are black and all this other stuff. They would use something like this, you know. But there are enough scholars that have investigated and who are still investigating it, and they presented their works to other peers for review, and it has been accepted. And so again, that symposium that took place in 1960, um, Dr. Gelb, in his presentation, he made it clear and gave enough evidence to refute the idea of what the Neo-Assyrians in their inscription have been, how that was interpreted. Because again, you don't have this in Sumerian literature. In fact,
Hello?
what
Oh,
you have is the Sumerians being having close contact and even allowing them to live among the Sumerians. We just don't have this type of interaction with, say, one of the nations or the families in ancient Kush, Ethiopia, or even in Egypt. Now, of course, if you go to some of the Narmer, did I say Narmer? Is that, I think, Amar? I'm sorry, the Amarna tablets. If you look at some of those, yeah, you see that interaction, as far as correspondence between the people of Kemet and those people in that time. But you just don't have this close relationship that the Sumerians had with the people of Dilmun, Makan, and Meluhha. And I think that's very telling. So, fortunately, um, uh, Ignis Gelb, kind of cleared that up, as far as it's from the research that I've been able to gather. Um, so when we read, or when we saw the video from the good brother, even in his opening, well, it's like this, we say. In other words, between 2600 and 1800, there is a strong archaeological and textual evidence for contact between Meluhha of Harappan culture and Mesopotamia. Notice what he says. He says Meluhha of the Harappa. Everyone knows that there was serious trade with the Indus Valley and the Sumerian civilizations, and we have it. This is well documented. Harappan. So Meluhha is associated with Harappan culture in Mesopotamia, but previous or subsequent to this interval, the evidence is entirely lacking. What is observed instead from about the middle of the second millennium BC is a shift in the geographical locale of Meluhha in the ancient sources. Keyword, in the ancient sources, wherein Meluhha no longer refers to the region to the east, but to a location in Africa. That's on page
all
134 of
right.
his
Can I ask a
dissertation.
question about that, if you don't mind? I don't
Go.
mean to cut you off. How do we propose that happen in real reality? I can see how we can see it happen looking over these texts, but how do we
Mhm.
propose that a land that was once India to people all of a sudden became Kush? You know what I'm saying?
Well, the same way that we can look at today how we look at the word for Kush, it usually is inclining to a dark or black people, if you will. Right? People can look at someone, say, from the Indus Valley, and aside from their hair, possibly aquiline features, they would say, well, they're still black people because they're
Mm-hmm.
dark brown or black. So some people would take that argument and say, well, Meluhha, yeah, they're black because they're from India, and
Mm-hmm.
Indians are black people.
Word up. I learned a lot. Lastly, I say, I mean, I don't know how much time you got, but I don't want to take too
Got
much of your
babies in the
time
house.
on this Sunday. I seen something, it wasn't addressed. I'll cut out some of the other stuff, but the brother basically says Egypt is, and obviously I know it's the statement will probably make you roll your eyes and wonder if anybody got the brunt of your presentation. But the brother says Egypt is not Meluhha. LOL. Egypt don't have lapis lazuli. Egypt was not into a major trading place. Was not into a major trading place for resources. He also
Yeah.
said the Immortals of Meluhha is the first book of Amish Tripathi or whatever. First book
Okay.
of Amiverse, and also the first book of Shiva Trilogy. Before I get your response, I'm gonna say, Tony, bruh,
Mhm.
you must not have even been listening. It wasn't even
Mhm.
Meluhha that he was. It don't Meluhha don't even go with Egypt. It's the Makan that you said was Magan. Not, they had Magan and Makan in here that was being equated with Egypt. Just like we just detailed,
Yeah.
it was the land of Cush and another area, if I'm saying it correctly, in the Indus Valley that we should look
Mhm.
at to be the two lands of Meluhha in different time periods. I don't know if I showed that I learned from the presentation or not right there, Chuck, but you got the floor.
I mean, hey, he's right as far as that first part that they're not Egypt. Got that right. They're not Kush. No, got that right. So, I mean, I like the brother. I see him on Facebook all the time. I always go, slapping him upside the head every now and then. But he's a cool brother. I asked him to come on the live multiple times, but for whatever reason, everyone has their things, and sometimes it's an inconvenient time, as you know. But yeah,
But in
if
his
you go over
refutation
the
of your work, he was misplacing stuff, correct? You never said that
yeah,
Egypt was.
no,
So we agree,
no,
Tony. Yeah, the
no,
work didn't say that.
no. No, I think maybe he came in late and he'll just have to go over it when he watched the rerun. I think he'll get the point. But he's seen my information on this. I touched on it in some of the groups he's been on. I always go after the people that push this kind of stuff, like the Sumerians with black and all
Yeah, yeah.
this.
So we got a new
Uh,
brother here that I
so
have not put one moment, G Lacan, if you don't mind. I never spoke with Alfred Jordan. Normally I ask people to share they let me see, hold up. I normally ask people to, because we could close our camera, but on the introduction, if you don't mind sharing your camera, brother Alfred Jordan, and if we would like to hear from you and what you thought about the presentation. If you don't mind. And if you don't want to speak, then I understand. He probably ain't even by his mic right now. So we'll go to G Lacan. What's up with you? What did you hear? And you got any questions for Brother Chuck Morgan?
yeah, very powerful presentation. I really appreciate it. Um, Mr. Morgan, there's um there's a brother you was even on his show by the name of Brother Garfield.
Hmm.
He had um he had the Hittites it's in the back chat. Hey, put that thing up. It's in the back chat. Smash of the Hittites Trinity. That he was saying these was the Hittite trinities before Egyptian Haru, uh, Asar, and you see it. Hold on. Yeah, that's his is it showing?
Hold on, hold
Are you
on.
familiar with this image? It's from the Gilgamesh.
Hold on. Let me get it up. I took it down by accident. Let me see.
Okay,
Uh,
Can y'all
what am I looking at?
hold on? You about to see an image that someone said was a Hittite trinity before Asar and Aset. Am I correct on that, Brother G
yes,
Lacan?
that was Brother
Okay.
Garfield.
Okay.
But
And
he did was he cropped out the wings and just showed the three. He just he didn't show the whole image of it. He just chopped
hold
off
on,
the
he tried to tell someone. There's a clip of him
on his
telling
show.
people that this
Yeah.
was a Hittite trinity before ancient Egypt.
Yes, sir.
Oh wow! Well, let's hear what you got. Well, I'm going to read this before I get in it. It says Orthrio stakes depicting Gilgamesh. So that should let us know right there when we hear the word Gilgamesh. But I ain't even gonna trip. We'll hear from Brother Chuck. Gilgamesh between two Minotaur demigods holding up the sun disk from Tel Hal. Again, that's what the same thing says, and the additional information says Syria, 9th century BC. So should I continue talking? Because this is from Syria, 9th century BC. This will be wasting my brother time. All we got to do is read the caption to know Garfield out here ancient. But go ahead, Chuck.
Uh, I don't know anything about Hittite culture, so I'm mute on that point.
Word up. Well, I'll add to this that first, this source that he brought to say that this predates Asar and Aset is from the 9th century BC. So before we have that discussion, he needs to bring up a source that predates Asar and Aset. Now, want to be hella funny, the Hittites didn't even start Hittite civilization. Hittite civilization was started by some people called the Kheta, and they would be known as the Hatti. And actually, if I go right here, and so this is why I know cats be leaking. Let's do a wiki just to teach people, right? If you come to wiki and you put in Hattic, Hattic, you're going to find out this was a language. Look, ancient people of Anatolian, the Hattic language and the extant language. Let's see who spoke it. Who spoke it was the former people who was in the Hittite area, look, before the Hittites. And so what it's showing is if you want to go back to the time periods of when the ancient Egyptian manifested their trinity in the areas of the Hittites, you won't even be dealing with the Hittites. You're going to be dealing with the Hattic people who left the Hittite capital named Hattusha. They spoke a language isolate, so we know they wasn't related to the Hattic, to the Hittites. And so I think
So
that source he brought from
okay.
the 9th century wouldn't be sufficient in showing what he's trying to show.
So let me. I'm gonna land my plane, but Mr. Morgan, do you know any uh, uh Oriental or Near Eastern ancient history that deal with the Trinity before the Egyptian?
That's not, to be fair and be honest. That's just not something that I ever put any emphasis or interest
Okay,
in looking for. So I can't.
yes, sir.
No, I haven't because I've never looked for it.
Got you. Understood.
Word up.
Thank you.
I
Appreciate it.
think we got a new brother here, like I was saying earlier, brother Alfred Jordan. If you're new or not new, we'd like to hear from you. You don't got to keep your camera open, but we want to see who we talking to from Jump Street. There you go. What's up? Peace. You can turn your camera off and do your thing.
Yeah, hi
You know,
brother.
people be
I'm
yeah.
driving right now and I'm just listening in.
Yeah, you ain't gotta worry about the camera. Keep driving. You can turn it off. We just like the docs who we talking to. So, what is your opinion on the presentation or anything you heard in today's show?
I kind of missed a lot of it because my phone had cut off and died, and I'm just now jumping back in. So I caught the little first part, and that was about it.
Okay, that's cool. Well, if you want to chime in on anything, feel free. And then did I pass you up, G Lacan? Or you said your word already? Um,
I already said
okay, peace. Let's hear from the last griot, and we don't want to hold our brother Chuck too long unless you got a few free moments. Last griot, you got any questions or comments?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Go.
All right. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It was very balanced. Mostly, I've heard the two words being used in context of Egypt and the Kushites. I think you've provided a lot of context to the entire history of the usage of the two terms. But as you were going through your presentation, what came to my mind were some other references that people often employ to make the claim of the Sumerians being black. And part of the evidence they like to pull up is with regards to the Sumerian language, which we know is a language isolate, first of all. But one that I came across some time ago is in a book called The Origin of Nations by George Rawlinson. I believe it was a Rawlinson that completed the decipherment of the cuneiform, the last stage of the decipherment. And in this book,
No, no,
it,
it was no, it wasn't Rawlinson who completed it. It was his associate.
oh, I
Um,
see.
I forget his. Give me a second. I don't good. I have my screen share. Let me pull it up for you.
Okay. But was this Rawlinson guy influential in the cuneiform in any way? Was it also a guy who worked on the decipherment?
Yes,
Oh, I
yes.
see. So he's got this book. There's this guy, George Rawlinson. I don't know if he is related to Henry Rawlinson. He's got this text called The Origin of Nations. And in there, they talk about the process that led to the final decipherment. And they said that in the last stage, they had to use two languages. One is the Gala language from Ethiopia, present day Ethiopia. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this other language from the southern part of Arabia that were instrumental in deciphering the language. So this other book that I was reading that referenced this book is using that as claim that the ancient Sumerians may be linked to the East Africans. I just want to know what your thoughts is on that.
I found no evidence to support that,
I see. I see.
and particularly with that language issue, those languages. What you would have to do is you would have to pull up that publication, and then we would have to go through the inscriptions that they are using because I'm trying to do this because I do this all the time, and I'm trying to figure out how best way to apply it and approach it. Okay. When the decipherment process took place, they used, I have this already in my notes, they used Alam, Persian, and I believe it was Akkad, which they call Babylonian. One of the first words that they were able to put together that they saw, matter of fact, give me a second, give me 1 second, okay, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, okay, so in the decipherment, right, so first of all, when we get the word Sumerian, all right, that's derived from an Akkadian term, Shemeru, all right, and what's interesting about that, that meaning, which was southern land, the person that coined it was a linguist named Jules Oppert, because in 1869 he decided to call the new language that they had discovered that was, emerging, was Sumerian, and he did it by reading an Akkadian inscription, Shamat Shemeru U Akkad, Akkadi, and he translated that as King of Sumer and Akkad. The bilingual text showed that the Sumerian version of the inscription read Lugal Kiengi Kiori K4. Okay. And so, because it wasn't really understood to any real any concentrated levels, it was decided to just remain that the language would be Sumerian, and that's where you got the term Sumerian. The Bestun inscription played a major role in the decipherment. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, it's never been put in a museum. It's a giant carving on the side of a mountain in Iran. So in 1836, Henry Rawlinson is said to have physically climbed the mountain, and on several occasions he made copies of different parts of the inscriptions, including paper mache molds of sections. And he realized that there were 3 separate versions from the text, all in cuneiform or wedge shape. And he guessed that that it might be 3 different languages. So by 1838, Rawlinson and an Irish guy named Edward Hinks. That was his name. Edward Hinks, because he was a clergy. Edward Hinks had deciphered the easiest of the 3 languages with the help of an international group of scholars. So it was Hinks who had worked on cuneiform previously, and Rawlinson, if I'm pulling this up, and Rawlinson used some of his insight, meaning he used some of Hinks's insight. One part turned out to be an ancient version of the Persian language. It used an alphabetic cuneiform script with 43 characters. Old Persian was enough like a Middle and Modern Persian to be understandable, and the text proved to be a royal inscription by the Persian king Darius I, who lived in the 5th century BC, EPCE. And so the second version of the inscription had 131 different characters and was in an ancient language called Alamite, who had constant interactions, battles, and at times the Elamites had conquered parts of southern Mesopotamia. And it was deciphered later by a group of another group of scholars. And the last version was the Darius Bestun inscription, which turned out to be Akkadian, and the language was spoken by or written by the Mesopotamians for centuries. So Rawlinson went back to Bestun in 1847, 10 years after he had begun the project, to work on his 3rd version of the text. And Hinks had already completed much of the decipherment using different trilingual inscriptions, also from Iran. This is found in you can find this generally in any grammar book on the decipherment process of Mesopotamia, or particularly Wedge say writing with cuneiform. I have heard people like Clive Winters who have put this out and that they use Kushite and Ethiopian and it did all these. I've heard that, but when confronted in different chat groups that he might be outside of Facebook, you don't. I haven't not seen anyone put those inscriptions up to where they could be scrutinized, and we can check the Sumerian language corpus and then make that comparison. If what word are they using for this translation?
Oh, I see.
What
I
because
see.
there are literally thousands of inscriptions attributed to the Sumerians. So you need it would have to be, because you can look at one word and you'll find 10, 20, I found even 50 different definitions for one word,
Mm-hmm.
for one syllable.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see.
for me, I mean to end it, for me, I haven't seen any evidence that backs that part up. I've heard
So
other people say that this is cognate with that, this is cognate, and then when I go and do the background checking on the words that they're using and
mm-hmm.
claiming to be the cognates, these are not even Sumerian words.
So I mean, I know you talking about people outside of the professionalism, it seems, but even are you saying you would find these 50 definitions for one sound or morpheme inside of a Sumerian text corpus or in a
Yes,
dictionary?
yes,
And so
you
this
will
can't.
find that. Yes.
Would you attribute this to the earlier confusion from Assyriologists or Sumerianologists, or what? Not wanting to latch down on the definition, or what would you
Yeah.
attribute that to?
Well, see, that was the whole thing, and that was something that I pointed out in another article that I put up. Can I share my screen real quick? I'm being courteous. Actually, I'm stalling for time.
Yeah, it's all good. You know, you can use your presentation.
Solid. So, in this here, what I pointed out was that where is it? Those linguists and Assyriologists of the early days of decipherment and translation are commendable. Rawlinson, Opert, Hinks, Kramer, Jacobson, Jeremy Black, who are all noteworthy. Likewise, trying to move this thing. Likewise, in 2023, we also have an exceptional group of Assyriologists taking Sumerian language studies and research to new heights, to levels that haven't even been dealt with. Some of the information that's coming out now because of inscriptions that have been uncovered, the adaptation, the study, the better familiarity we have with the Sumerian language and other languages like Akkad. These individuals such as Postgate, Yazerman, Bodani, Rubio, Ezart, all equally noteworthy in their fields have revolutionized the Sumerian studies with new discoveries on and on and on. So these people who um, dealt with it, like Rawlinson, Hinks, Opert, Jacobson, Kramer, Black. These are some of the leading Assyriologists, Finkel, Edzer. All these are the Samuel Kramers of today in that particular field. For anyone that studies that kind of thing, there are others. There's more that I didn't have room because of a short presentation on this. For those who study in Mesopotamian language, literature, culture, these are the people that we know that are doing have multiple books, peer-reviewed, scholarly works, archaeological endeavors, and so on and so forth. Not taking anything away from those great men of old, but a lot of that information, some of it has become obsolete at this point. And that's just the reality of it. I hope that answers your question.
Oh no, definitely. Yeah. So I mean, man. Now, go ahead.
Since we're here, I want
Yeah,
to
exactly. That's just what I was about to say. I seen the colors, and so I think you read my mind. So I'll let you speak. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing because this can be a whole nother presentation on to itself. But this one is a follow up to one that I did on the Dagger Squad channel. It's about 2 or 3 years ago. So I've done multiple of PDFs, multiple of these presentations on different topics, and I feel whenever they're necessary to pull out, I'll pull them out. Well, I just do it just for a hobby while I'm at work to kill 8 hours to work. But wait a second. Well, what I was it's here's just to get to the obvious. The purpose of this presentation is simple: to bring some clarity, context, and chronology to, in addition to the most up-to-date information regarding Sangiga, known to most as the Blackheads. This name Blackheads has been cited, sung, because if you look in, this is because I used to people say sag, but sung, as far as how we're taught in Sumerian courses, because this makes the the like you say, ing, like sun, what's it? Give me something that rhymes with ing.
Sing.
Catching, running, dating. That is what was in this field identified this song as being sung. It's like a throat, like ing, sangiga. Sangiga, known to most as blackheads. The name blackheads has been cited and used by the misinformed as documentation and or an implication that the ancient Sumerian people known as Sumerians regarded themselves as black people. This is a diorite statue of one of the heads that had broken off the bodies in the excavation of Gudea. But what I was pointing out here was when you put the nouns dumu, meaning son, and sang, head, together, you end up with the compound dumu sang, firstborn, or head of. I just wanted to underscore this relevant point that head didn't always indicate an actual head. Context is key. With the above statue of Lugal Dalu, make him Babarsal, Whitehead, the Whitehead. All right, anyway, so let me get past all of this. I just some little things I wanted to point out. In Sumerian literature, there are several examples related to the color black. However, nothing that would indicate the Sumerians as being black in color or as black people. You can consult the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature, the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, the database of Neo-Assyrian texts, and scrutinize every reference to black. Nowhere will you find any inscription making that connection.
Can I
Let's look at a few
stop
of the
you for a
colors.
moment and ask you a few questions? I know you're building, but I can clearly see we have a similar methodology in making sure that we ain't gonna say nothing about no text, because you know you looked already, right? So you ain't out on a limb. They not about to go discover something in the text corpus unless they put it there last night, right? But here's the question. So I understand and I appreciate your manifestation of the lack of the description using this color, because now we got some place that we could go to. But this is what I do want to ask. Was that even a thing in their lexicon? Meaning, what categories of description do we have for any adverbs which would manifest or represent or denote a physical attribute or a personal quality? Like, let me give you some instances. Do we have like a fat, or a tall, or any type of thing linked onto their neck? Because we know different cultures did it different. For instance, the American Indians did it in the way that we don't do it. They'd be like running bull, you know what I'm saying? And just take a whole something else and attach that to your effigy. So we don't need to limit it to color. Is there anything that they attached adjectively to manifest one's image or effigy, verbally or whatever?
Yeah, they did. And I have another PowerPoint that kind of goes into that. So this is part of why I put this together, because I was focused more on what the talking points are in certain circles today. in what they're saying. This is what the Sumerians identified themselves as. But we do find Sumerian inscriptions as well as Akkadian, where they do make those clear indications of who and what this or that person is by description. But in these color schemes that I pointed out here, even with Dara, blood red, you just they're pretty obvious. And if whenever it's necessary, of course, we can pull up an inscription.
Well, real quick on that last slide. I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
you continue, but I just didn't want you to go
back
because you just said red Dara, and then I remember you. I don't know if you heard me earlier when I was making a. I'm in the Hebrew lexicon, but it's still Semitic, where we find blood and red going back to Dam, the DM root. But what are you in? Is this Akkadian we're in, where we go back to the DR root for blood and red?
Yeah, that is a loan word. That is a Sumerian.
Oh, so
loan
this
word.
Dara isn't the way they wouldn't have originally said it. Where do you think they got it from?
That's where you got Sue. Sue is red.
Oh, okay. So Sue would be the way they said it without loan word, correct?
Yeah, because as you know, the Akkadians did coexist in the outer areas with the early people of Mesopotamia. And from time to time in their interaction, depending on what period, because as you made clear that the Akkadians did at one time conquer the Sumerian city-states. And after their occupation, they internalized and preserved the Sumerian language. It was a language that was used by the aristocracy, the young scholars. They had schools. They had scribal schools for Sumerian students. So they preserved the language, and it was deemed as sacred to them. By the time the Guti came in and conquered the Akkadians, pushed them out, they pretty much destroyed what was left of Sumer. And it wasn't until what was his name? Utu Hegal in his campaign, they uprooted and removed the Guti, drove them back to the Zagros, and that brought in what they called the Sumerian Renaissance, because it was at that point that Ornamu and other leaders started to put out, in addition to the preservation of the Sumerian language and culture, they emphasized it more because of the conquest and the near erasing of the Sumerian society. So they just went on this massive century-long campaign of revitalizing the language, and that was during that period that more inscriptions started coming out, where we have literally the hundreds of thousands of inscriptions that are on clay tablets, cone, bone, and everything else that they had. But what I was getting to was like the Sumerians even had a word, ebony. Now, generally, we call ourselves black, but the closest I think we can be is brown for the most part, at least in America, as far as I'm concerned. So ebony, they even had a word for it, essie, in essie. And I put that in this inscription where in the building of Ingirsu's temple, they talk about a wood, from the mountains, from the ebony mountains, I will have ebony trees, because nish, this as a determinative. Of course, you know that determinative is not pronounced, so isi, but you see it in the inscription, nish isi. So anybody, if you see this little hook like a crescent over a word in particular, like this says here, that makes the sh sound. So nish, it'd be nish. When you see this, you know that the word that follow, because this is as a determinative, is this is a piece of wood or something likening to wood. This will be like brown wood. And so the word has never been attributed to Sumerians, nor Sumerians referring to anyone using this label, not even for the Sumerians themselves. Some have even speculated that this word sangiga was in reference to hair on the head, which was an old and misleading conclusion. It's misleading because the word for hair on the head we know is sikh, and you'll find it multiple texts. And I just put it here where you can see the uniform character, Sikhi. And this person here is on the standard of ore um, uh, uh, chest, war chest. I think it's, yeah,
Well,
this is
let
on
me
the
ask
gift
you
of the
something.
kings with that.
It's just as egregious and almost foolish. And I mean, I don't even understand the logic of a people who would see iconography like this and then try to say this was a black person. But let me go back to Kemet. The flip side is on that. Because then they see the opposite iconography of this and say it's a white person or something. You see, so we just lost because we see this right here and we say, nah, that was black people. Then when you see the black people with the afros, you say they was white people. So I just don't get it. You know what I'm saying?
Uh, you know, I watch your show. I watch Garfield. I watch everybody because you know when I'm at work, if I'm not typing this stuff out, I'm watching you guys because I only catch you late. I try to catch you during the daytime, but I have a small business and family time and a whole bunch of stuff, so I don't have time like I used to have. But when I catch the shows, I watch these things. I see the arguments. I hear the arguments, and I'm like, I'm glad I'm not in it because I wouldn't get any work done. So I really can't engage in it. But I watch them because I do gain insight and um, influences that helps me in my arguments in the refuting of certain claims that people have made over the years. It's very few. I mean, very few. But because you know with TikTok and you know various other forms of social media, these little 2 minute clips can influence people and to confuse them. And you know, I just because this is something that I study, I just like to make sure that you know there's no confusion in this arena. And so this is just to give you an idea of
So
that.
lately, in your research, because I know honestly, I could go to my Facebook and lightweight see me doing my own personal research, trying to figure this out 10 years ago and look just like you looking, and I had to let that go. Like you'll probably never hear no saga guy in my discourse, probably hardly. You probably never heard that, right? But there are people who still try to maintain these contentions. Specifically, one of our brothers who was in the chat earlier, I think it was Babylon Don. But I noticed that I asked him to click the link, and you know, I'm not asking him to start no contention, but to see if he had something sourceable behind what he was saying, or if he could falsify anything that's been given here. And so, are there any sources besides just like underground YouTube pages that are still putting forth that Sagig got mean the blackheads and that the Sumerians was black people?
No, no, no. I'm not finding it. Not in the scholarly areas. No, not because of any kind of racial bias. It's just we can look at the language and we can listen. We don't have any DNA samples of the ancient Sumerians, so we can't use that. So what we are relying more so on are inscriptions, and there are plenty, or some of their own iconography. Matter of fact, I'm a quote. This is a quote I use from my brother, and I'm going to put him up here real quick. Hold on, let me see if I got it. Wait. Hold on. But I used it in another presentation because I got it off of a show he did. Oh, here you go. And I use this because I think that is very relevant. I think they know who they are. And I know that we sound crazy telling them that they are something other than what they themselves depicted themselves as. We sound crazy.
So
And that's my brother Zion Lex.
So this was him trying to say that bypass the methodology using, and I think they know who they are, and I know that they sound crazy. Tell them, wait. Explain this to me, please. I'm sorry.
No, I watched him on the Killer Priest show, and he was giving a presentation about the Sumerians, and he made a quote. You know, he made a statement, and I said, I like that. And
but they was Sumerians, right?
Well, whoever he's making a reference to. This is not a quote from a Sumerian source. No, this is from him. This is what Zion Lex said, and I thought it was profound, and I wanted to use it So I always put that in there in some of the captions whenever if I hit somebody with something, I'll use this
I
quote
got
that
you.
he gave because I thought it was very good.
But look
Because
at the
I think
context. Go ahead, not to cut you off.
I
What you
understand
think?
the context.
Well, I know
I
you
already know
know,
where
but
he. I watched it.
go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
He's trying to use the Sagigat thing, and this is his source material for it. Because he's saying, I think they know who they are, so they know they blackheads. And I know that we sound crazy saying that they blackheads, but telling them what they are something other than what they say themselves and depict themselves as, we sound crazy. So he trying to say they depicted themselves as blackheads and they called themselves blackheads. Am I incorrect?
The interpretation uh, in the early areas of Sumerian translation, they took the word black and head and as if the Sumerians are walking around with no sense of context saying, we the blackheads, without any kind of background. What does that term actually mean? So again, not of course not throwing anything on him, but I just thought that this quote was very profound because I had never heard anyone put it together like that. I think they know who they are. And I know we sound crazy telling them that they are something other than what they themselves depicted themselves as. So what I would always say, follow up with is that this is partly partial to how they depicted themselves. An example of how the early Sumerians depicted themselves can be found when consulting them and their alarm images. In the British Museum, first is the plaque of King Etanatum. The first, he's depicted bald and aquiline hook nose, bare chested, wearing the Kalkinis, featured kilt of his ancestor Ernanshi. And you'll see the Kalkinis. Kilt is the standard dress of the Sumerians in their throughout their iconography. We'll see it probably yeah, like this little piece right here. So this is part of that standard, just like standard of ore, standard in cache. That's a stand. This is the standard.
Man, I
So
think you killed this already, though. I mean, no one has like it's certain things that we're doing. I mean, I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying we're doing them in conjunction or working with each other, but by accident working with each other to bring some of this, you know, what I'm saying, this knowledge to the information. I mean, to the forefront. But even still, you're showing what ain't saying black so people can stop making those errors. And I'm showing people what y'all said, what people said didn't say black actually show in the different fields of research and in different areas. It's kind of like the reciprocal of the same type of research. It's kind of funny to me. But all it's gonna do is help us to stand on a more solid ground when it comes down to it. I do my work publicly since I'm not in academia, if there's some contention for it to be found, hopefully I can find it through my information dissemination. But none of the contentions that I found have been qualified to the point to discredit anything. The best discourse I was able to have over this subject was with Asar Imhotep and Ujahu, because these are brothers who know the language. And even though we disagree on certain things about the blackness in Egypt, I got them to a point where at least they had to concede and fall out of the discussion or just close down in YouTubes and never teach about Medu never, ever, 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 ever again. We ain't seen it happen since. And so, I mean, I'm going to applaud you. And another thing I would like to say is not only was the information 100 and appears to be on point, but a lot of us don't know how important it is to have a graphically astute presentation. And you do. All of your presentations are well put together. You got a good graph, because we see, you know, I don't do no computer science, but a lot of us know the graphic user interface is what make the people want to deal with the app. But when we behind it you know what I'm saying, doing all the homework, they really can't see how many 30,000 pages you had to go through to probably form these 41 slides and then style them and design them in a way so that they should possibly be taken seriously, because you ain't just stopped at the knowledge and then threw up some raggedy rinky dink slides that I can't even take seriously. You know what I'm saying? So you got it all the way 100% the way it's supposed to be for a scholarly presentation, and I appreciate that.
Real fast, real fast. This was something I wanted to put out there. So in this photo, you see what is called a black-headed seagull. What stands out here is the obvious, is the color of the song head, or the nap. Okay, which is black or dark, and dark gray, if you will, some cases. We clearly recognize and can differentiate is the color. The brown-headed cowbird, as with the previous example, the name places the focus on the obvious, the brown head. I've used these two examples to demonstrate how the names of various animal species, in this case with birds, their names identify their outstanding feature, or the obvious, and the color being the brown head. An American actress, Lucille Ball, was well known as the redhead, the nutty redhead. Yet he was clearly not of a red body. This is not at least the same color as the head. And each of these three adjectives only describes the color of their hair, nap. So the question should be, if that's the color of their head or hair, then what color was the bodies of the Sumerians? Unfortunately, the Sumerians do not supply us with an answer. Nevertheless, claiming that they were black people would be fallacious. Although the Sumerians do not inform us of what their skin color was, they do, however, offer substantial insight with their vivid iconography, emphasizing key details of their phenotypic features. Now, then there's a word known to the Sumerians for black raven, uga. And of course, that's a determinative mushin. And where is it? Let's look at mushin here, letting you know that this is reference to something black. This is a black bird. So here we have the black raven specifically, and then in an inscription, you'll go to the National Museum in Iraq. Because some of these inscriptions don't even have names; they just have them listed by number.
Numbers, yeah.
And it talks about how you pound line of a black raven, you mix it with cypress oil incantations with incantation text here. And what clear description here isn't a black head, rather a completely black bird, a black raven. Obviously, the Sumerians knew the difference. Therefore, no ambiguity when using black as a description for themselves or other black people in general. The prevailing elephant in the room that the Black Sumerian theorists tend to ignore is the notable monobrow. It's an outstanding African facial feature and not a significant depiction in African art. However, it is an obvious feature that Sumerian artists emphasize and is found on some of the earliest depictions of the Sumerians. In regards to that, they also have how this monobrow was their connection to Indus, one of the premier deities in Nippur. In contrast, however, the Egyptian artifacts of the kings and Egyptian unibrow depiction is virtually non-existent. Because one of the things I've always noted in that I very rarely, if I've ever seen, an Egyptian Kemetian having a monobrow.
Yeah, I know, that's hella funny. I mean, I had to laugh out loud because it ain't one representation of no Kim. They ain't hacking that monobrow. They never drew that. You know what I'm saying? They was like, that's ugly.
So Enlil gave you your fierce face and serious brow. And this is the Babali of Inanna. That's another script. You can go to the electronic text of Sumerian literature and pull it up, and you'll find it right there. So I'm not even gonna go to it. Like I said, I just do these things for my own, you know.
Okay, to be fair, somebody
Oh.
just in the chat and keep on. He acting like I have some reason why I don't want to share it. Why you be doing me like that, Sot 12? I simply was trying not to interrupt my brother's presentation by putting something on the
What's
screen
that?
over it, so I snatched
All
it
of
off the screen. But he shared this with me to show to you, and I'm just not putting words in people's mouth, but it's trying to me, it's trying to pull up an image of someone that looks more phenotypically African to the presenter, I presume, or to the person Sot 12 in the chat who was like, well, look at this one. And I don't know, what would you say about this? Just
Well, see, that all depends on what type of bias you may have, because someone can look at this and say, well, that looks Arab. I don't have lips. It depends on the genetic makeup of that individual. However, what's interesting about this, Brother Bash, and I think it was the brother Reggie, he had hit me to this. Let me get out of this. I'm trying to get to my screen. Hold on, but hold on. Give me a second. Give me a second, because this is relevant, because that particular image you have on the screen, that person makes reference to, what is it at? Oh, I think I shut it down. Hold on, give me a second. Okay. Let's look at that real quick. Can I share this real quick? Oh, wait a minute. No. Actually, I have it on this one. Okay. Yeah. I have it right here. Matter of fact, I don't have to go that far. I was just showing it. I don't even know if you even saw it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so yeah.
you're not
The
sharing
Neo-Assyrians.
you're not sharing it.
Now, oh, okay. Blah, blah, blah. Give me a second. Oh, there it is. Okay, so the Neo-Assyrians offered a vivid description, but not the Sumerians. In a fragmentary cuneiform tablet, K8692, we read the following: his wives, his sons, and his daughters, whose bodies, like his, have black skins, like asphalt, which is bitumen. He counted as booty.
Oh, hold on, man. Wait, I'm going crazy. So what are you reading right now? This is the people he captured.
Yes.
So y'all trying to make him be a black man, but he's showing you that he went off and captured some black people.
Exactly.
Oh my God, you put hands on fools right now. I'm gonna let you continue. I'm gonna have to give you a for that, because I'm like, oh, you be ready like me. You got the slide already. Go ahead.
God, I got 100 of these things sitting on my computer. I just ain't put them out yet. I keep my arsenal in the silos. But yeah, this is a powerful depiction of when he captive
This
the
is so
heart
useful.
King of Kush and the Assyrians.
Now let me
And
ask you some
you can
more
go
questions
do
about this
WG.
text. Oh, you can't hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, no, my
yeah.
bad.
WG.
WB
Yeah.
who? Lambert?
Lambert. Yeah. Booty from Egypt. Yep. And this is all you can find this. As a matter of fact, give me a second. Let me try to pull that one up.
Whoa, you gotta stay here, bro. Cause you don't
Go
remember
ahead.
when I just did this whole show about the bitumen?
Yeah.
And you just gave me this out of the Egyptian perspective source that says his wives, his son, and his daughters, whose bodies like his have black
Like
skin like
asphalt.
asphalt bitumen. Oh, it's dead. It's over. Oh, James seen this. You just helped me so much. Because I'm taking this back into my context. I just did a whole show to show why they put bitumen. Bitumen, we know this asphalt that you could turn into a semi-viscous paste and rub on the body, which makes a mummy appear black. Right? And so we trying to figure out, well, why did they have to appear black? And we found out it was because the Netcher was black. And then I found the text, the embalming ritual text, which shows that the bitumen makes the skin look like the Netcher. Now you just by haphazard, thank you. And I'm gonna ask you if I could get this source somehow. What is it's on the screen, so to Harker King of
Yeah, I can see the source. I have the whole. Yeah, I have it.
And so, what time period is this? This is the about 700, 690 something.
Yeah, Yeah,
Around
this was during the period of Ashurbanipal, and between Ashurbanipal and Ashur-Hadan.
Well, it's checkmate because everybody be
Yeah,
saying they skin don't look that black, but here you go, Chuck, with the
it
source that
is
say
describing.
his
Yeah,
wives and his sons' bodies like his have black skins like asphalt bitumen. Again, they're not talking about the Egyptians here. At the time period, they're talking about the people who took over Egypt, the Cushites. Nevertheless, it's a dead giveaway. It's a dead giveaway to why they put this bitumen on their skin, as it was being compared
yeah.
to black skin for a long time. Would you?
And in addition to that, let me see if I can pull. I don't know if I have it on this slide, but hold on. Give me a second. Give me a second. I'm gonna have to hold up. What I was trying to pull up is just the that same image that you put up, right? There it is. Okay. Sorry, I'm multiple things here. Okay. Ooh, okay, here we go. Now, um, this same depiction here, right? So what we just read previously when they went in on their campaigns and to go into Egypt and during the period of Taharka, where is it at? Yeah, on my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Ethiopia, Meluhha, where he makes a mistake. But the point is that Taharka was the king of Kemet and Cush. So if this person is there some kind of a light skin, dark skin type of conflict going on? I don't know.
Well, let me
I
ask
don't
you
I
though.
don't I don't I don't buy that this is I mean he's making a clear distinction between himself or his type versus the people that he
Yeah, that
went to
bot.
war
Yeah.
with.
But was they now? He didn't say Missouri. He said Kusi, right? For that line. Or do
Yes. You see,
see
yeah,
that's
right
if they
here,
said
right here.
Missouri to be
Yeah,
a checkmate.
yeah. No, he said right here, Taharka, king or the Musur, right here, Egypt. This is what you get for Egypt, and of course, Kuusi, Kush,
I'm talking about on the
right
line
there.
with the black bodies though. You know what I'm saying? On that line where he say their bodies would he say Taharka king of Egypt or Taharka king of Cush? I think it did say Cush still, yeah.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, still, the point, yeah, was made that he was the king, and this was the same person that Ashurbanipal as well as Esarhaddon had to deal with during that Neo-Assyrian period.
Man, this was a
See,
wonderful presentation, dude.
Taharka forgot the might of the god Asur, the goddess Ishtar, and the great gods, my lords, and trusted in his own strength. He marched against the kings and officials whom the father who had engendered me had appointed inside Egypt to kill and rob them and take away Egypt from them. It's pretty self-explanatory. But even if this was just to answer the person who made the comment to answer that question clearly, uh, this has no bearing on the Sumerians because the Neo-Assyrians weren't Sumerian. Their culture wasn't even Sumerian. All they did was utilize the wedge-shaped writing system. That's all.
So now that we got an
No more than
attestation that shows that those Cushite skin was black like bitumen, they wouldn't have had to put bitumen on their skin in order to match the image of the nature in the Kemetic perspective. Just so people know, it could confuse people when I switch. We're talking about Sumerian and Akkadian tradition right now, which showed nothing about no blackness from my brother's research. At least linguistically, none of those attestations showed anything about blackness, and they weren't on the continent of Africa. Uh, Contrary to my research that I'm doing on the contrary Actica, which shows some of the ancient Egyptians in their lexicon indeed in the word that they call black don't match it up with the social construct of the European. But just like how he just noticed they had black skins, who was that? Esarhaddon or Sennacherib? Um,
Ashur-Haddon.
yeah. So if Esarhaddon or Esarhaddon could could notice that they had black skins. I'm pretty sure they noticed they had those skins too, and it was the skin of their nature, their deity, and that's what I like to show often. And so I want to thank you, Chuck, for getting it in. I know we got some people want to ask you or give some comments. I see my brother Reggie just stepped in the building. Shout out to you, Reggie. You got the floor if you have anything to say to Brother Chuck.
I just want to show the source that that when I was talking about one of the first instances of racism, and Chuck Morgan, my good brother Chuck Morgan, expert scholar, man, love him, right, was watching. So